Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Now, today I'm going to be talking briefly about overclocking your PC hardware, whether that be a graphics card or a processor. Now, the reason I'm doing this little quick video is I don't need to spend a great deal of time explaining overclocking and why I like doing overclocking, and the benefits and negatives of overclocking are also pretty self-explanatory. If you're worried about overclocking, then hopefully I can answer some of your questions within this video. Now, let's start off with what is overclocking if you're not familiar with the term itself. Overclocking, the term refers to turning up the speed of a piece of equipment that you own, whether that be a phone, a desktop PC's CPU, a desktop PC's graphics card, a laptop, but I wouldn't really do any overclocking on a laptop, mainly because one of the big drawbacks of overclocking is it's going to require possibly a bit more voltage, which is also going to in turn cause more heat. They're the two big sort of drawbacks from overclocking processors nowadays. You're very unlikely to kill your processor unless you go absolutely crazy with the voltage, which you really shouldn't be doing anyway. And most processors won't really do, well, they won't get damaged unless you turn the voltage up beyond, say, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 volts. That will start to get to the point where the processor will get damaged, because it has a maximum amount of voltage a processor can handle. So as long as you don't go above that, you should be fine. The same with the graphics card, really. You can normally, out of a processor and a graphics card on most devices, you can get away with an overclock without actually turning up the voltage. But in the cases where you do, you just need to step it up bit by bit. And I'm going to talk a bit about the benefits of overclocking now. So, say you're like me, and you have bought your first your first PC, right? You spent, say, £500 putting it all together, and it performs great. But you want to see if you can get a little bit more frames per second. Maybe you want to maintain 60 FPS at 1440p, or something like that. Or you want a little bit more performance here, a little bit more performance there in certain applications. Now, overclocking can help with that, because it is turning up the speed that your processor runs at. Now, with AMD, anything that's labelled Black Edition is overclockable. And with Intel, anything that's marked K, such as my i5 2500K, is an unlocked overclockable CPU. Now, with AMD, you can overclock on most of their motherboards I could overclock on a 970 chipset, but I also did it on the 760 chipset, which is the entry-level chipset to AMD at this time of recording this video. On Intel, however, you will need a overclocking chipset. Now, the motherboard I have is an Asus P8 P67. So the chipset's P67, which is not normally an overclocking chipset, but this particular board does have overclocking features that allow me to get my processor from the base clock of 3.3 GHz to a overclocked of 4.5 GHz. Now, the way that you do a lot of the overclocking in these modern BIOSes is you find the multiplier frequency, which normally is around 33 or 32, which is then times by the base clock, which is by default on most processors 100. So you do 33 times 100, gives you 3300 megahertz or 3.3 gigahertz. Now, the way you overclock most of them now is through turning up the multiplier, which is basically what determines how fast your processor will run at once it's times by the base clock. That is how you do most of your overclocking. Some motherboards will have an auto overclocking feature, like my one does, which will evaluate your processor in some sort of weird way, and then it will actually apply an overclock that might be beneficial to you. But personally, I prefer doing it manually. That way you might actually be able to score a bit of a higher overclock. Now, it will give you a bit of a performance boost. Like, I was running 3D Mark Firestrike on normal preset. Without my overclock, I was gaining 4,000 to 5,000 3D marks. With overclocking my graphics card and my processor and doing some tweaking, I actually managed to get that to score up to 5,802 3D marks, which is quite a significant jump, really. But I was having some weird fluctuations with my score, but I gained about 10% on average. But that's basically the gist of overclocking. It is not dangerous unless you go crazy stupid with the voltage, which you shouldn't really be doing anyway. You will also need decent cooling, so anything like a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo or anything like that will be fine. Anyway, guys, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you for watching. Please comment, rate, and subscribe.